The year is 1917, a year that would forever alter the course of history. The world watches as the Russian Empire, a vast and sprawling dominion, teeters on the brink of collapse. This behemoth of tradition and autocracy, long seen as an unshakable force, crumbles under the weight of revolution. From the ashes of this upheaval, a new entity emerges, the Soviet Union. It is a nation born from the fervor of revolution and the desire for a new world order. The Soviet Union is founded on the ideals of equality, socialism, and an end to oppression. It promises a utopia for the working class, a society where everyone is equal and free from the chains of the past. In a world ravaged by war and inequality, the Soviet Union stands as a beacon of hope. It offers a vision of a better future, one where the common man can rise and thrive. But revolutions like stars burn bright but often fade. The initial fervor and idealism give way to the harsh realities of governance and power. The Soviet Union's journey is a tale of ambition and tragedy, of dreams realized and promises broken. It is a story of great achievements and profound struggles, of a nation that sought to reshape the world, but was itself reshaped by the forces it unleashed. It's a stark reminder that even the most utopian visions can be twisted by the realities of power. The leaders who once promised equality and justice became entangled in the very systems of control they sought to dismantle. Despite its many challenges, the Soviet Union made significant contributions to culture, science, and global politics. It became a superpower, locked in a tense Cold War with the West, shaping the course of the 20th century. Yet, by the end of the century, the Soviet Union itself would dissolve, leaving behind a complex legacy of both hope and disillusionment. The echoes of its revolution continue to resonate, reminding us of the enduring power of human aspiration and the inevitable complexities of realizing those dreams. The Soviet Union, despite its name, was not a union born of shared aspirations. It was an empire in its own right, cobbled together through force and expansion. From the Baltic states to Central Asia, diverse cultures and ethnicities were brought under Moscow's rule. The promise of a socialist paradise rang hollow for those who yearned for self-determination. Resistance was met with brutal repression as the Soviet state prioritized its own survival over the freedoms it claimed to champion. Under Joseph Stalin, the Soviet Union took a sinister turn. Paranoia and suspicion became the order of the day. The purges began, a campaign of terror that consumed millions of lives. From ordinary citizens to high-ranking officials, no one was safe from the reach of the secret police. The gulags, vast forced labor camps scattered across the Soviet wasteland, became synonymous with suffering and death. The human cost of Stalin's ambition was staggering, a dark chapter etched in the annals of history. After Stalin's death, a brief period of political and cultural thaw emerged. Nikita Khrushchev, eager to distance himself from his predecessor's brutality, initiated a series of reforms. Political prisoners were released and censorship relaxed. There was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. However, the thaw was short-lived. The Soviet system, built on control and repression, proved resistant to fundamental change. The seeds of dissent, sown during the Stalinist era, continued to germinate beneath the surface. By the 1970s, the Soviet economy began to stagnate. Centralized planning, once touted as the path to prosperity, proved inefficient and inflexible. Shortages of basic goods became commonplace, leading to frustration and resentment among the population. Meanwhile, a dissident movement began to emerge. Writers, artists, and intellectuals risked imprisonment to criticize the regime and demand greater freedoms. The Soviet state, facing growing internal pressure, became increasingly brittle. In 1979, the Soviet Union made a fateful decision. It invaded Afghanistan. What began as an attempt to prop up a communist regime quickly turned into a costly quagmire. The Afghan people, fiercely independent, waged a relentless guerrilla war against the Soviet invaders. The Afghan war drained the Soviet economy and exposed the limitations of its military might. It also further tarnished the Soviet Union's image on the world stage. turning public opinion against the once-feared superpower. By the mid-1980s, the Soviet Union was in crisis. Mikhail Gorbachev, a relatively young and reform-minded leader, took the helm. He understood that drastic measures were needed to save the Soviet system from collapse. Gorbachev implemented two key reforms: Perestroika, aimed at restructuring the Soviet economy, and Glasnost, which introduced greater political openness and transparency. These reforms, while well-intentioned, unleashed forces that Gorbachev could not control. With Glasnost, the lid of repression was lifted. Mikhail Gorbachev's policy of openness, known as Glasnost, aimed to bring transparency and freedom of information to the Soviet Union. This policy allowed citizens to voice their opinions and criticisms more freely than ever before. It was a radical shift from the tight control that had characterized Soviet governance for decades. Nationalist sentiments, long suppressed, resurfaced with a vengeance. Ethnic groups and nationalities within the Soviet Union, who had been forced to conform to a singular Soviet identity, began to assert their own distinct identities. Protests and demonstrations became common as people demanded recognition and autonomy. From the Baltics to the Caucasus, demands for independence grew louder. In the Baltic states of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, movements for independence gained momentum. Similarly, in the Caucasus region, republics like Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan saw a surge in nationalist fervor. These movements were not just political, but deeply cultural, as people sought to reclaim their heritage and sovereignty. The Soviet Empire, held together by force and ideology, began to unravel. The central government's attempts to maintain control through military presence and propaganda were increasingly ineffective. The ideological grip that had once unified the vast territories of the Soviet Union was weakening. One by one, Soviet republics declared their independence. The declarations were often met with celebrations, as people replaced Soviet flags with their national flags. These acts were not just symbolic, but marked the end of an era and the beginning of new, independent states. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, a symbol of Cold War division, signaled the impending collapse of the Soviet Union itself. The wall's fall was a powerful image of the broader collapse of communist regimes across Eastern Europe. It was a moment of jubilation and a clear indication that the old order was crumbling. In December 1991, the once mighty superpower ceased to exist. Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as the president of the Soviet Union, and the Soviet flag was lowered for the last time. The dissolution of the Soviet Union marked the end of a significant chapter in world history, reshaping the geopolitical landscape and leading to the emergence of 15 independent republics. The Soviet Union's legacy is a complex one, filled with both grand ambitions and tragic failures. It began with the noble goal of creating a more just and equitable society, a vision that inspired millions and promised a new dawn for humanity. However, as the years went by, the dream of Utopia was overshadowed by the harsh realities of autocratic rule. The Soviet Union succumbed to the temptations of power and control, leading to widespread political repression and the stifling of dissent. Its collapse marked the end of an era, a dramatic conclusion to a century-long experiment in social engineering. The fall of the Berlin Wall and the lowering of the Soviet flag symbolized not just the end of a political entity, but the collapse of an ideology that had once seemed unassailable. Yet, the impact of the Soviet Union continues to be felt today. Modern Russian cities still bear the architectural marks of their Soviet past, and the memories of those who lived through the era are filled with both nostalgia and regret. The Soviet experiment serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power. The gulags, the surveillance state, and the political purges are stark reminders of what can happen when power is concentrated in the hands of a few. It also underscores the importance of individual liberty, a value that was often sacrificed in the name of the collective good. The protests, the dissidence, and the eventual fall of the Berlin Wall highlight the enduring human spirit and the desire for freedom. The revolutions in Eastern Europe and the celebrations of newfound freedoms are testament to the enduring human desire for self-determination. People fled oppressive regimes, risking everything for a chance at a better life. The abandoned Soviet buildings in the Chernobyl disaster site serve as haunting reminders of the contradictions and failures of the Soviet system. The removal of Lenin's statues symbolizes a break from the past, a desire to move forward while acknowledging the lessons learned. It's a reminder that even the grandest utopias can crumble under the weight of their own contradictions. As we reflect on the Soviet Union's legacy, we are reminded of the importance of balancing ideals with reality and the need for vigilance in safeguarding our freedoms. The story of the Soviet Union is not just a chapter in Russian history, but a global lesson on the complexities of power, governance, and human aspiration. It continues to be a subject of international discussions and academic studies, offering valuable insights for future generations. Ultimately, the legacy of the Soviet Union serves as a powerful reminder of the universal quest for freedom, justice, and human dignity. It is a story that resonates across cultures and societies, inspiring ongoing movements for democracy and human rights around the world.